Summerslam, the biggest pay-per-view to happen to professional wrestling in the month of August. Most years, that is. We are in the thick of SummerSlam season, and though we have no idea what WWE will have in store for this year's installment, in a year where nothing is normal, we can still look back at all the memories from the past, in particular, the bad ones. I have a lot of SummerSlam-themed content planned for this month, including a look at the worst and best matches and moments in SummerSlam history. This week we're getting the worst out of the way. Number 8. The Great Khali, World Title Contender. You know, 2007 was not a great year for WWE. In other news, the sky was blue and water was wet. Not only was the company reeling from the fallout of the Chris Benoit tragedy and the Signature Pharmacy steroid scandal, injuries were plaguing the locker room. Things were bad across both brands, but SmackDown got it the worst. Their world title hopped around from Batista to The Undertaker to Edge in a matter of weeks, until finally Edge had to drop the belt due to injury. Ultimately, the world title was placed on the broad shoulders of the Great Khali, the embodiment of the idea that for Vince McMahon, smaller guys have to prove they can get over, while bigger guys have to prove that they can't. Well, Khali got the chance to prove just that with arguably two of the worst World Championship matches in SummerSlam history. First in 2007 when he defended the title against Batista. God bless JBL for trying to use physics to explain why Khali's slow, plodding offense was supposed to be devastating.
It looks like it's slow. The problem is he's hitting you with sledgehammers.
After some slow clubbing and even slower holds, the match had a miserable DQ finish when Khali hit Batista with a chair. Not something befitting this supposedly unbeatable monster who throws his weight around. At least it was done in under 7 minutes. By the next year, Triple H was on top of SmackDown as WWE Champion, and the Great Khali was breathing down his neck as a challenger. My theory is Triple H wanted to prove that he could have a better match with this walking refrigerator than his former Evolution partner. It was a better match, but it's not saying much. Khali spent a lot of time working the head smush, but he should have known better as the cerebral assassin has way too much brains for that to hurt. At least it had a clean finish with one of the most ridiculous pedigrees I've ever seen. Take that, animal! Number 7. Shane McMahon versus Eric Bischoff. Of all the madness we saw in 2003, nothing was crazier than Kane finally unmasking in front of the world. The Big Red Machine, who it turned out just had body dysmorphia the whole time, went on a path of carnage for weeks, reaching its peak with a tombstone on Linda McMahon. Something else that was crazy to see in 03? The transformation of Shane McMahon from cowardly, snobby rich kid to tough-as-nails demigod. I said demigod. Shane wanted revenge for his mother, as he and Kane spent much of the rest of the year trying to kill each other. But before all that, the future best in the world had a warm-up program with Raw GM Eric Bischoff. See, Bischoff was keeping Shane away from Kane, then Kane would end up costing Shane a match between the two non-wrestlers. Jim Ross threatened to sue Bischoff for what was mildly put as an unsafe working environment. He decided not to sue, though, on the condition that Bischoff signed a contract to a match with Kane. Kane spared Bischoff and got himself counted out, but then we learned that according to that contract, the winner of the match would face Shane at SummerSlam.
If you don't got it, get it. If you don't get it, figure it out.
Just when the angle couldn't get more ridiculous, Eazy-E upped the ante by barging into the McMahon family home and sexually assaulting Linda McMahon on national television. That was brutal to watch, but you know what's almost as bad? Linda's acting.
How did you get in?
So in the span of a few months, Eric Bischoff publicly made out not only with Vince McMahon's wife, but his daughter as well. Who says Bischoff was only hired to be humiliated? Anyway, on to the match. Shane had things well in hand until he was assaulted from out of nowhere by Jonathan Coachman? The nerdy commentator who'd been made fun of from the first day he was on TV? Sure, if anyone needs a heel turn right now, it's that guy. Well, way to open the door for heel Michael Cole, you jerk! The beatdown dragged and dragged as Coach would ham it up on the house mic while JR and King had their mics cut off at the desk.
Oh, again! Eric Bischoff!
Finally, co-GM Steve Austin made his way out to even the odds, helping Shane absolutely destroy Bischoff, with that portion somehow feeling even more dragged out before Shane picked up the win. The 13 minutes this match took up felt more like 23 when it was all said and done. Not only did the match kill some brain cells and bring us heel Coach, by extrapolation it's also what led to he and Austin's planned match at Taboo Tuesday 2005, a match that never happened because Austin was apparently supposed to lose, so he left. Smart man. Number 6. King Mabel's time to shine. King of the Ring 1995. Former tag team champion Mabel has turned heel and has shockingly won the annual tournament, a bit of a drop-off from recent winners like Bret and Owen Hart. Fans celebrated the victory by chanting ECW and throwing garbage, so off to a great start. Now known as King Mabel, this man who'd already earned a reputation for hurting his opponents in the ring was gifted a main event match at Summerslam against Diesel, the world champion and the christened leader of the new generation. Can't see this one ending badly. The writing was on the wall well before SummerSlam. Mabel's push was such a royal flush, down the toilet that is, the intrigue of the match at SummerSlam wasn't even whether or not he would win, but rather whether or not the newly turned heel British Bulldog would interfere. But even if the telegraph didn't come from a mile away, even the most gullible fans knew the Federation wouldn't put their eggs into the King Mabel basket. Though maybe they were hoping this giant grimace with a crown would attract a McDonald's sponsorship? Now usually when fans refer to the 5 moves of doom, you can't count them between both guys in the match, but that's what we saw here. But give credit to Kevin Nash for making things interesting with a rare dive to the outside, the first and last Lucha spot of his career. Man, no wonder he had it out for the X Division years later. But when Diesel went high, Mabel went low, too low, dropping his ass and putting all of his weight on Diesel's lower back, legitimately injuring him and leading to an awkward, drawn-out recovery period before the match could resume. In a rare production botch, the cameras totally missed Sir Mo pulling down the turnbuckle pad and bumping the referee. That's why I'm on camera right now. I can't show it to you. This would lead to a run-in not from the Bulldog, but his former Allied Powers partner Lex Luger, who was rewarded for helping Diesel by getting kicked out of the ring by Diesel. I can't imagine why he'd bolt for WCW less than a week later. Diesel would mercifully win the match, ending the Mabel as main eventer experiment as soon as it began. Within 9 months, Big Daddy Cool was also gone from the Federation. Thanks, SummerSlam 95. Number 5. Team WWE versus the Nexus.
God, motherfucker, I can't believe I got it. No, freaking God, no, fine, God.
The Nexus, one of the biggest drop balls of the past decade. A group of fresh talent from the first season of NXT invaded the main roster, and for a brief moment, it felt like things wouldn't be the same again. Then SummerSlam happened. A massive 7-on-7 match was set for the big event, as a ragtag group of WWE stars would put their differences aside to battle the common enemy in the Nexus, who had run roughshod over the other wrestlers for weeks. This was war. This was for the fate of the company. This is for them attacking GM Bret Hart, which would in turn lead to the anonymous Raw general manager. Those bastards had to pay. Team captain John Cena recruited Edge, Chris Jericho, Bret Hart, John Morrison and R-Truth to the fold to take on Wade Barrett, Justin Gabriel, Heath Slater, David Otunga, Michael Tarver, Darren Young, and Skip Sheffield. The Great Khali was meant to be on WWE's side, but he got written out and was replaced by the recently rehired Daniel Bryan. You don't get to ruin things for a third time, Khali. The match itself had its fair share of drama, and eventually it came down to John Cena versus Barrett and Gabriel. Cena was responsible for coming up with the finish of the match, and in the movie he later publicly regretted doing, decided to chumpatize his opponents and look a bit too strong in the end. WWE left a lot of money on the table with this one. Keeping the storyline going after a Nexus win could have done great business and even possibly made new stars. But instead, all these new guys got stomped on and were made to look like fools for the entire remainder of the group's existence. In the end, the only Nexus member to get any kind of serious push was the one they fired the day after they debuted. Number 4. Ted DiBiase buys Sapphire. No wrestler better captured the 80s ideals of wealth, greed, and excess like the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase. Of course, with wealth and power often comes the exploitation of the less fortunate, and Ted's gimmick really embodied that. From the implied ownership of his manservant Virgil to the time he tried buying Hercules from Bobby Heenan, the whole ownership of other humans thing was rather prevalent in his run. Was the gimmick an indictment of the super rich, or a tone-deaf explanation of the worst of humanity? Wrestling, society's Rorschach test. In the weeks leading up to SummerSlam 1990, Dusty Rhodes' valet Sapphire was suddenly receiving lavish gifts from a mysterious benefactor.
She got a full league mink coat. She got a diamond and sapphire necklace. She got a cruise around the world.
The mystery went on throughout the pay-per-view, beginning with Sapphire no-showing her match against Queen Sherry. Killer look, by the way. After trying to track her down all night, a heartsick American dream finally faced the truth when Ted DiBiase emerged on the interview platform and revealed what many had already guessed. It was he who had successfully purchased Sapphire's loyalty and services in order to humiliate Dusty.
Feast your eyes on my latest purchase, the sweet Sapphire. Oh no!
Hang on, wasn't the whole crux of the Big Boss Man's face turn earlier in the year was he couldn't be bought by DiBiase? So he's not okay with police bribery, but apparently has no problem when DiBiase tries to violate the 13th Amendment. I'm kidding. Sapphire didn't become a slave or anything, but between her and Virgil, the optics weren't great for Biasi. Also, is it still a coincidence when Sherry says something like this in her post-match promo?
I fail to see what's so funny about a missing person.
I said she was missing. I didn't say anything about her being a person.
I mean, there was a whole ass war over that. The angle was a moot point anyway, since Sapphire was gone from the company soon afterward. It all turned out to be some overly elaborate way to write someone off with no possibility of a payoff. And yeah, the rich white guy buying the black lady is just kinda weird. Number 3, the Lex Express breaks down. I do plan on eventually making a whole video about the Lex Luger experience in the Federation, so I don't want to get too detailed here at the risk of repeating myself, but this shit needs to be addressed. Here are the abridged notes of the build. In 1993, Lex Luger was a narcissist until he became an All-American and body-slammed Yokozuna on an aircraft carrier. Then he rode around the country in a bus for several months, campaigning to be WWF champion. Nobody told him that's not how any of that works. Then Summerslam, the main event, the world title on the line as Luger challenged Yokozuna in his one and only title match. With all this hype and all this rah-rah USA attitude behind him and the fact that it's his only title match, surely this meant that Luger was going to walk out the champion, right? Right? As a final touch prior to the big match, Luger delivered a rousing speech in front of the Lincoln Memorial to drive home what this match meant to him. Just kidding, they talked to his bus driver instead. Wow, so cool he gets to watch the pay-per-view on a tiny black and white TV. I wonder if they paid him in gas station sandwiches too. The match had a few interesting moments, including an outside brawl that went for a full minute as referee Earl Hebner just stared at them, making no effort to issue a count. After Luger withstood everything Yoko threw at him, he knocked the champion out of the ring with his bionic forearm, winning by countout. And man, was there a patriotic celebration. There was the music, the pyro, the balloons, the confetti, the Steiners and Tatanka hoisting him up in celebration, the crowd going wild, except Lex did not win the championship, because he won by countout. Luger blew his one and only title shot. Why is everyone so happy about this? The Federation's success was built on the formula of the hero winning the big one, and the build for Lex Luger seemed to line up perfectly with said formula. But after he failed to move the needle as a top guy in waiting, the company did an about-face and pulled this stunt, having their cake and eating it too. I thought only WCW made their top guys look this stupid. All that time and effort spent trying to create the next Hulk Hogan out the window in the dumbest way possible. Go USA! I'm more willing to forgive a dumb idea if it comes from an original place, but that's not even the case here. Saturday night's main event in April of '89 saw Rick Rude defend the IC title against Jim Duggan. Rude got screwed by the fastest 10 count I've ever seen, and the whole arena popped as though Duggan had won the title and the presidency in one fell swoop. There were no balloons or confetti, but the vibe was very similar, right on down to the music. Whose bright idea was it to try this more than once, much less for the main event match at SummerSlam? Number 2, Jerry Lawler versus Jake Roberts. Hey fans, are you tired of WWE constantly bringing up Jeff Hardy's past with drug and alcohol abuse for storyline purposes? Well, imagine how bad they'd be at it if they didn't have practice. We go to 1996 when Jake Roberts returned to the company for the first time in 4 years, having declared sobriety after years of addiction. After failing to win the King of the Ring tournament, wonder whatever happened to the guy who beat him, Vince saw Jake's path of redemption as easy content, or at least an easy way to garner sympathy for Jake. Enter lifelong teetotaler, cunning linguist, and noted youth enthusiast Jerry Lawler. The King mocked Jake's alcoholism for weeks until a match was made for the two at SummerSlam. Lawler drew the ire of the crowd in Cleveland by wearing a Baltimore Ravens jersey, which is actually pretty funny considering he's a lifelong Browns fan. That's probably the only real fun part of his opening act, where the King took more digs at Jake's addiction as well as his wife.
The only reason he married her was because he had kisses sweeter than wine.
The match itself was nothing special besides Lawler's cheating to win being so blatant I'm convinced referee Harvey Whippleman was on the take, but then Jerry rubbed Jake's face in it by pouring whiskey all over his face and down his throat. It kept going until special guest Mark Henry grabbed the bottle out of Jerry's hand, and in doing so accidentally drenching 1 or 2 lucky fans. The match and the whole angle really laid bare the company's worst tendencies. Jake dared to show a sign of weakness, and instead of the company trying to support and encourage him, they used their power to drag him back down to one of the darkest points of his life. And what a shock, they would do this over and over again over the years. But to make it even worse, unlike what we saw Jeff Hardy do to Sheamus in that bar fight, the bully ended up winning. Though you can't totally blame the company, it should come as no surprise that Jake fell off the wagon a few months later and was gone for the promotion. I wonder if this had something to do with it. Before I reveal the worst SummerSlam moment, here are a few honorable mentions. Hulk Hogan versus Shawn Michaels. Just relax, folks, this is going to be somewhere on both countdowns, okay? Though there is a large portion of fans who love seeing HBK flop around like Kurt Hennig at a trampoline park, and you could argue that it was justified because of Hulk Hogan's politics, there are still others who see this wacky sell job as an immature, unprofessional move on the part of Michaels, a throwback to the days before his first retirement. But as you can see, a lot worse has happened in the rich history of this show, which is why it's only residing in the HMs. Zeus! In the summer of '89, the cinematic world was blessed with the Hulk Hogan vehicle No Holds Barred. Following the success of that film, the WWF gave fans a tie-in that was too good to pass up. Tiny Lister, the actor who played Zeus in the movie, got to reprise his role on television. Zeus had it out for Hogan because he was upset at being billed under the Hulkster and losing the final battle in the movie, which means that apparently he actually did beat up Lucifer from Supernatural. Basically, he worked himself into a shoot, which was still a work. It all came to a head at that year's Summerslam when Zeus teamed up with the Macho Man to take on Hogan and Brutus Beefcake, or Beefcake Barber as Zeus frequently called him. Hogan, Savage, and Beefer did the best they could to work around the limitations of Zeus, who made Mr. T look like Mr. Wrestling too. But as ugly as the wrestling got, at least the crowd still cared. And the number one worst moment in SummerSlam history is Owen Hart injures Stone Cold. I hate to end the countdown on a grim note, but it is what it is. Of all the epic encounters over the Intercontinental Championship in SummerSlam's history, 1997's entry might be the most memorable, but for all the wrong reasons. Stone Cold Steve Austin was red hot by the summer of '97 and was poised to go to the next level with a win over the IC champ Owen Hart. The match was living up to people's expectations and could have even been the best of the night until Owen famously dropped Austin on his head from a sit-out piledriver, resulting in a broken neck and temporary paralysis. As bad as it was, that Austin was even able to crawl over and gently roll Owen up for a 3 count is a miracle.
Austin's hurt. He may have a broken neck.
Now in the end, Austin would eventually come back and get to the top of the mountain, setting in motion the Federation's resurgence, but the injury did force Stone Cold to change up his style, and it undoubtedly took years off his career, not to mention the scare the company had when their golden goose was laid out with an injury. As you might expect, Owen suffered politically for this in a major way. Aside from an occasional squash here and there, Austin wanted nothing to do with Owen again after this, which meant the Blackheart was never going to be a main eventer while the Rattlesnake was around. Owen was hampered by a glass ceiling that would affect his career until another tragedy less than 2 years later. Certainly there have been worse matches and more tasteless moments in the history of the biggest show of the summer, but the horrific long-term implications of one badly delivered piledriver at SummerSlam earns this its place at number 1 on the list. What other bad SummerSlam matches and moments did you want to see on this list? Let me know in the comment section below. And come back in 2 weeks when I give you the other side of the coin with the best of. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.
When all you guys go back to LA, your home turf, and if you lose, we will ban you from the Summerfest.
He'll be banned from SummerSlam is what you're saying.
SummerSlam.
SummerSlammed out. So wait a second.
And Summerfest, whatever that is.